Naishtaki. Reading from the Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 3, Chapter 7, Further Inquiries by Vidura, Text 40. Etan me Prichita Prasnan Ader Karma Vitsaya Bruhi Me Gyanasya Mitravad Agjaya Nasta Chakshusha Etan me Prichita Prasnan Hare Karma Vivitsaya Bruhi Me Janasya Mitravad Ajaya Nasta Chakshusha Etan Me Prichita Prasnan Hare Karma Vivitsaya Bruhi Me Janasya Mitravad Jaya Nasta Chakshusha Etan Me Prichita Prasnan Hare Karma Vivitsaya Bruhi Me Nasya Mitravad Ajaya Nasta Chakshusha Etan, all these. My Prichita, of one who inquires. Prasnan, questions. Hare, of the Supreme Lord. Karma, pastimes. Vivitsaya, desiring to know. Who he kindly describe. May unto me. Agnasya, of one who is ignorant. Mitravat, because of friendship. Ajaya, by the external energy. Nasta Chakshusha, those who have lost their vision. Translation. My dear sage, I have put all these questions before you with a view to knowing the pastimes of Hari, the Supreme Personality of Godhead. You are the friend of all, so kindly describe them for all those who have lost their vision. Purport by His Divine Grace, ISKCON's founder Acharya, Jagadguru Patita Pavana Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Vidura put forward many varieties of questions with a view to understand the principles of transcendental loving service to the Lord. As stated in the Bhagavad Gita 2:41, devotional service to the Lord is one, and the mind of the devotee is not diverted to the many branches of uncertainties. Vidura's purpose was to be situated in that service to the Lord, wherein one merges undivertedly. He claimed the friendship of Maitreya Muni not because he was Maitreya's son, but because Maitreya was actually the friend of all who have lost their spiritual vision due to material influence. Om Jnana Timirandasya Jananjana Shalakaya Chakshur Unritam Dena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. Shri Chaitanya Manobishtam Slavidam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupaganamayam Dadati Svapadantikam Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Utapadakamalam Shri Gurun Vaishnavamscha Shri Rupam Sagujatam Sahagana Raghunathan Vinam Dam Sajivam Sadvedam Savadudam Parijana Sahitam Shri Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padan Sahagana Lalita Shri Vishaka Vitamscha Hey Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dinabando Jagatpate Gopisha Gopika Kanta Radhakanta Namostute Jayatam Sirito Bangur Mama Manamatergati Matsarvas Papadambojo Radha Madana Mohano Dibya Bindaranya Kalpajumada Srimad Ratnagara Singha Sunasto Srimad Radha Shila Govinda Devo Kristalabi Savyamano Smarahami Shriman Rasa Rasarambi Bamsi Bhatatasti Taha Karshan Venu Swanar Gopir Gopinata Striye Stuna Tapta Kanchana Gorangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Vishabhanu Sute Devi Pranamami Hari Priye Vanchakalpadrubhyascha Kripasandubhyevacha Patitanam Bhavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasadi Gaura Bhaktivinoda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Ram Ram Hare Hare Etan me prachita prasnan Hare karma vivitsaya bruhi me janasya mitra vad adaya nasta chakshusha. My dear sage, I have put all these questions before you with a view to knowing the pastimes of Hari, the Supreme Personality of Godhead. You were the friend of all, so kindly describe them for all those who have lost their vision. So this is always very sweet when technical and very analytic and even well ascertained questions. The book Perfect Questions, Perfect Answers. It's not that the answers are the only thing that are perfect or that should be good, but the questions have to be good because they have to be based on wanting to know Brahma Jignasya, the absolute truth, not questioning for the sake of sense gratification or other type of ulterior purpose. So as the question has to be good to make the answer, the good answer, worthy of the worthy question. So therefore, the spiritual master and the disciple both have to be bona fide. So if the spiritual master is not bona fide, oh, the big problem. But equal, if not more, the problem is most people are not qualified disciples. So we want to be qualified disciples. And Prabhupada doesn't waste any time in re-emphasizing what's described here. Vidura himself is saying why he is putting all these questions unto you with a view to knowing the pastimes of Hari. There's a saying, to know me means to love me. In other words, he doesn't want to know or see the pastimes of Hari, just like entertainment, like we want to turn on the TV set or go to the movies. but with a view to perform devotional service. And Prabhupada states that in the very first sentence. Vidura put forward many varieties of questions with a view to understanding the principles of transcendental loving service to the Lord. And just as sense gratification is all splayed out this way and that, sometimes we're here, sometimes we're there, sometimes we're this, sometimes we're that. What are the non-devotees? They have one of their sayings is, he reinvented himself. Satsvarup Maharaj, when he was a brand new devotee meeting Prabhupada perhaps for the second or third time, in one of the questions and answers in the storefront class at 26 Second Avenue, Srila Prabhupada, what type of person should I be? He had been reading all these different avant-garde authors and their literatures. And, sometimes I feel I should be like this or be like that. And Srila Prabhupada said, this boy, Steve, is very nice. He types for me and brings me a mango and gives a donation from his job. Actually, it had already been established for some time. So you should all do like this. So just cut out all the mental speculation and all of and just focus it. Practical devotional service. So Prabhupada brings us to, our attention to Bhagavad Gita 241, which we all know was one of Srila Prabhupada's most inspirational verses from the Bhagavad Gita. And he related that to his own profound, life-changing, which we're now celebrating the 100th year anniversary, meeting of Srila Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati on the rooftop of his Ultadangi Junction Road temple, where he more or less built up the Gaudiya Math, and many of his leading disciples joined there and helped to make the Gaudiya Math a very powerful force, even to be reckoned with by Western scholars and the British Raj of the day. What to speak of challenging the caste Goswamis and becoming the shining star in the firmament of Gaudiya Vaishnavism at the time. So Vyayasyatmika Buddhir Ekeha Karunandana Bahu Shaka Hyanantascha Bahu Shaka. That doesn't sound very good, does it? Because it's not. Having various branches being splayed out. Do we want to be focused or do we want to be splayed out? That's right. Spaced out. Splayed out. Spaced out. And being not spaced out is based on being resolute in purpose, and the aim is one. Why are you doing what you're doing? Well, some of this, some of that, a little less of that, a little more of that, and maybe tomorrow I'll think differently. But a devotee, his life is very, very simple because he's focused on the same thing, wanting the same thing, endeavoring for the exact same thing every single day of his life. From the time he's a brand new bhakta walking in the door as a very young teenager, early 20s, all the way up until he's 75, 80, 85, 90 years old. And that goal is to achieve pure devotional service. A strong faith that by Krishna consciousness, one can be elevated to the highest perfection of life is called Vivasyatmika intelligence. And Prabhupada goes on to say how this faith is the basis of this one-pointed determination that sustains you, not just through, if you become conscious of me, you will pass over all the obstacles of conditional life. I'm a teenager, I'm a young 20s, I'm I'm at the top of the changing bodies, with my chest all puffed up, and I'm like emotionally, intellectually, physically at the top of my game, like 26, 27, 28 years old. And then, you know, oh boy, I'm like 35. I'm getting tired now, and then 40. And then, you still kind of look good up until when you're 50, mid 50s. And then, well, you're starting to look ugly and, you're like, losing and, get out of the way, old man. And, and then real old age comes upon you. And, so it's not just through all of that. The so-called old man always considers himself in the same spirit as the young man. Prabhupada writes in one purport that our conscious identification of self have nothing to do with the changing body. Anybody ever set up a table or with the changing bodies or the big changing bodies like at Rath Yatra, and people coming up and which one are you? They go to their kid. I like this one over here, and you're that one over there with a big pot belly, and ha ha ha. So people are so much identifying themselves as what they are in terms of their body, whereas the devotee, the humble sage, by virtue of true knowledge, sees with samadarshana, equal vision, on the spiritual platform, and that spiritual vision is based on understanding that everyone is eternally part and parcel of Krishna. And in that way, the devotee can actually, just like Vidura is saying here, what is the best welfare activity? What is the ultimate answer that will benefit all people? And we sing in the previous verse, spotless devotees of the Lord have mentioned the source of such knowledge, such happiness. How could one have knowledge, devotional service, and attachment without the help of such devotees? So this little interlude, all the questions have been answered, and we're coming to the end of the chapter. O spotless one, your answers to all these questions will grant immunity from all material desire, miseries. So this is the greatest charity, granting immunity, granting freedom from the onslaught of material nature by giving people love of Godhead. When Kardama Muni was pleased with his wife Devahuti, said, I am a master of all mystic powers, and I understand the glory of devotional service. And even though you are not as qualified as myself in austerity, penance, and learning, still I will grant you the vision to see how wonderful all of these things are. Just see. And Prabhupada writes in the purport in that section in the third canto that what to speak of charitable dispensation, but giving love of Godhead is the greatest gift of love that we can give to others whom we presume to love. One of Srila Prabhupada's young male San Francisco devotees was having trouble with the principle, no illicit sex. And he asked this kind of meandering question to Prabhupada, how can you, love a girl without having sex with her? It's a very unabashed question. And Prabhupada just kind of chuckled. This was in his apartment, which was, I believe, on the third floor overlooking the street. And Prabhupada just smiled. He went to the window and said, you want a woman? Pick one. And all the, young hippie girls walking in the street. But love is for Krishna. And that devotee, by the potency of Prabhupada himself, those words were very, very powerful. And it just like gave him the ability to practice brahmacharya very honestly and sincerely for a considerable period of time. And he remained a fixed up devotee ultimately to the time when he left his body, which was rather premature. He wasn't very old when he left. And he became one of Prabhupada's first physical servants. That was Upendra Das. So that type of faith and intelligence is called Vyavasyatmika intelligence. And Prabhupada directs us to the Lord's teachings to Rupa Goswami in the Madhya Lila, chapter 22. Shraddha Sabde Vishvas Kahi Surida Nischaya Krishna Bhakti Kaila Sarva Karma Krita Hoya. And that, Prabhupada says, is different than the direct translation. Faith means unflinching trust in something sublime. When one is engaged in the duties of Krishna consciousness, he need not act in relationship to the material world with obligations to family, traditions, humanity, or nationality. So what Lord Chaitanya is saying here, a strong faith in Krishna consciousness and performing the duties and activities of pure devotional service, Krishna Bhakti Kaila Sarva Karma is the perfection of all activities. All perfection will come simply by doing this one thing. Prabhupada saying that's like in the, what is it? Devarshi Bhutapta Ninimpatri Nam. You know the rest of it? So that's in the Bhagavatam where 10th canto? Yeah. So what is the basic translation of that? Devarshi. The one is not, one is, huh? 11th canto, there you go. Right. Later canto. That one who is surrendered to Krishna is not a debtor. Is not obligated to the forefathers, the ancestors, to the demigods, to anything in human society. Just by serving Krishna, all these obligations and debts and responsibilities are automatically taken care of. Family traditions, you just see how who's had the experience of their parents and immediate brothers and sisters becoming very upset when you become a devotee. Raise their hand. So we bear all that in mind. Prabhupada many times, there's the memoir of Jagatarini Devi Dasi, Srila Prabhupada's disciple. She was a very successful and up-and-coming movie actress in her youth. She even appeared in a famous movie depicting the outlaw cowboy of Australia hero Ned Kelly, played by the superstar at the time, Mick Jagger. She was the lead female role in that movie. And she joined and became a devotee, and like everyone was just like incredulous. How could she give up, such high stardom to, wear a sari and dance in the street and wash pots and like that. And so when Prabhupada came to Australia on his 1972 visit, the parents came to meet. Anyway, the father was very favorable. The mother was a little bit cautious in the beginning, but at the end of the darshan, Prabhupada had won her over, and he had given her his carnation garland, which he kept as a prize very nicely. Even after it had dried out, she kept it for many, many years. And Prabhupada's first statement to the both of them, particularly to the father, "You're very lucky because your daughter will not only deliver you, but all of your forefathers." And the father was just kind of like chuckling and said, "I always thought she would do something like that." So that high vision, Srila Prabhupada taught us that understanding, and that is our conviction. And as we give our entire life to Krishna consciousness, from boyhood to youth to old age, we'll understand more and more that that's actually the reality. even in this life, if they've shunned us and more or less purposely estranged themselves from us, or always and any and all meeting make it very clear to us their dissatisfaction and displeasure in our life's choices, still we will have the final word. Prabhupada even said that your parents, parents of his disciples, will understand the great benefit that their children became devotees in this movement at the time of their death. And even there was one, who was he? Devananda, his mother was passing away. She was very, very inimical. And at the time of her death, her son was there and said, "Where is your Krishna? Is he here now?" Those were her last words. And when that was reported to Prabhupada, says because of you, Devananda, your mother remembered Krishna at the time of her death, and she has gone back home, back to Godhead. Family traditions, humanity, or nationality. Fruit of activities are the engagements of one's reactions from past good or bad deeds. When one is awake in Krishna consciousness, he need no longer endeavor for good results in his activities. I mean, we don't have to go to school, we don't have to get a job, we don't have to break rocks in the rat race of the demon system. That's based on this body. But when we're awake in Krishna conscious, then the duties that we're performing are on the eternal platform. They're on the absolute plane. They are no longer subject to dualities like good and bad. The highest perfection of Krishna consciousness is renunciation of the material conception of life. This state is automatically achieved by progressive Krishna consciousness. The resolute purpose of a person in Krishna consciousness is based on knowledge. Vasudeva Saramati Samahatma Sadurlabaha. A person in Krishna consciousness is that rare good soul who knows perfectly that Vasudeva Krishna is the root of all manifested causes. And by watering the root of a tree, one automatically distributes water to the leaves and branches. So by acting in Krishna consciousness, one can render the highest service to everyone, namely self, myself, family, society, country, humanity, etc. If Krishna is satisfied by one's actions, then everyone will be satisfied, ultimately satisfied. You could say, like, by the actions of Jesus Christ, it didn't seem like they were very much satisfied with him because, etc., etc. But his so-called posthumous appreciation changed the entire world. And right or wrong interpretation, he was ultimately of Christianity. Prabhupada, when he took the devotees to the Boston Harbor Commonwealth Pier in May 1968, Prabhupada knew the directions. If anyone's ever been in Boston and tried to drive around before having GPS, it's a city tailor-made to make you get lost, right? They tell, okay, this street goes one way and then you go that way and you think you're going to get around, but whoops, you just like got on a dead end or got put on an expressway ramp to nowhere. And so anyway, so Prabhupada took the devotees down there, unalloyed steel printed on the warehouse. And Prabhupada said, Riley, they have unalloyed steel and we have unalloyed devotion. If a pack of jackasses, says you're good, what is that? We want a certificate from Krishna that this man has done something for me. You want to say, Jesus Christ, he preached for only 3 years. They killed him, but his mission was successful. So we are prepared to preach our message in the wilderness. There's the chapter of Prabhupada's struggles in the post India independence in the first years. New Delhi, 1950s, crying alone in the wilderness. And so those are some of the like most intense struggles of Prabhupada's entire life. That Krishna will hear us. You can read that in the the so-called, not saying so-called, it is so-called 7th volume of the Leela Amrita, which is called Prabhupada Leela, A Visit to Boston, 1968. What I just described is written very nicely. You can read there. If Krishna is satisfied, then everyone is satisfied. Service in Krishna consciousness is, however, best practiced under the able guidance of a spiritual master who is a bona fide representative of Krishna, knows the nature of the student, and who can guide him to act in Krishna consciousness. As such, to be well versed in Krishna consciousness, one has to act firmly and obey the representative of Krishna, and one should accept the instruction of the bona fide spiritual master as one's mission in life. Not just when he spoke them in the 1970s, but not fall into this diabolical, demoniac kind of thinking, well, that was then, and all of this kind of woke, new agey, kind of leftist liberal kind of thing. The mainstream media is, bamboozling everybody to think that this is really what everybody is thinking now. So therefore, we have to adopt Srila Prabhupada's instructions. Well, he didn't really mean it that way. And actually it's like this. And, we want to like soften the blow because people will be offended. That is not faith in the words of the spiritual master. Prabhupada personally said, I've written these books, every word with great thought and cautious understanding that these books will be the law books, the Manu Samhita, the law books for humanity for the next 10,000 years. Not just 40 or 50 years. Not only should one accept the order of the spiritual master as one's mission in life, but one must preach that instruction, that very same instruction. Prabhupada said, I have no credit except I had full faith in the words of my spiritual master, and I'm just presenting everything that he has said, what I have learned, I am giving it to you. That's all. To think that I'm more intelligent than the spiritual master and that I can reinterpret his instructions, or I think there was some fault in why he spoke like this. He was in some fault because he was brought up in this type of culture and he had this type of education, but this isn't this, if not, is the beginning of the fall down, but this seals your doom for certain. Intelligence means to understand more and more in depth the miracle and the genius of the words of the spiritual master. And we shouldn't judge the spiritual master based on their, what type of education they so-calledly received. Srila Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur, he said that in the one toenail of my spiritual master's lotus feet, Gorkashore Das Babaji was seemingly an uneducated illiterate. All the aristocracy and learning of the highest, most intelligent beings of myriads of universes are just in the one toe of his lotus feet. He had that understanding. Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur instructs us in his famous prayers for the spiritual master, Yasya Prasadad Bhagavat Prasado, Yasya Prasadan Nagati Kutopi, Dayam Stuvam Stasyayas Yastri Sandhyam, Vande Guru Shri Charanaravinda. By satisfaction of the spiritual master, the Supreme Personality of God had become satisfied. And by not satisfying the spiritual master, there was no chance of being promoted to the plane of Krishna consciousness. I should therefore meditate and pray for his mercy all the time, 3 times a day, and offer my respectful obeisances unto him, my spiritual master. So the disciple, he spends his life and all of eternity unfurling and elaborating and describing and discovering more the genius of the words of his spiritual master and how they apply to everyone in all times, places, and circumstances. I have written these books to be the law books for the next 10,000 years. That means that through all the so-called psychological changes in the way, the masses are thinking, or what they think is correct or whatever, Prabhupada's words can reshape very spiritually, organically, and nicely all that thinking to come to the point of pure devotional service. That's how empowered are Srila Prabhupada's words and Srila Prabhupada's books. So the disciple should be serving and as a discovery via media, because we have been given this chance to be over time and through assimilation in more knowledge than the people who don't. So we should bring people to also to come to the shore of this great ocean of knowledge and give them that darshan. That is why we distribute Prabhupada's books. Prabhupada said, what is the purpose of distributing books? To give people knowledge. Lack of knowledge, ignorance is the cause of all suffering. Right, isn't it? If you got your head good, then everything else works out. But if your head is all messed up, your life is a disaster. The whole process, however, depends on perfect knowledge of the soul beyond the conception of the body. How about that, huh? Not theoretically, but practically. When there is no longer a chance for sense gratification manifested in fruitive activities, one who is not firmly fixed in mind is diverted by various types of fruitive acts. So we should follow in the footsteps of Maitreya, who is the actual friend of all who have lost their spiritual vision due to material influence, and the representative of Maitreya and all great devotees. Right now, par excellence is His Divine Grace, Abhay Charan Arvinda, His Divine Grace, Srila Prabhupada. So He has given us lifetimes and lifetimes of beautiful literature to read and study and become a worshiper of Srila Prabhupada's Bhaktivedanta purports, his life's masterpiece, the Srimad Bhagavatam. Read the Srimad Bhagavatam repeatedly throughout your life, dozens and dozens of times, and as Prabhupada promised, there'll be ever new meaning and illumination with repeated readings. Etan me prachita prasan hader karma vivitsaya ruhi me janasya mitra vad ajaya nasta chakshusha. My dear sage, I have put all these questions before you with a view to knowing the pastimes of Hari, the Supreme Personality of Godhead. You are the friend of all, so kindly describe them for all those who have lost their vision. I'll take a question or two, but I want to utilize the remaining time to describe the passing of grandfather Bhishma Dev. Yes, Dr. Kyle, sir, Haribol. You have to speak more amplified and clearly so I can hear properly.
Thank you so much for giving class.
That's good.
I appreciate it, as always. classes that crack like a whip. You know how to like reach these points and just like, but now the microphone's on, so we'll have to shut it. Haribol? Haribol? No? Yes. Shut up. That's easier. Hello? Hello? Haribol? Okay. Whoa. So again, thank you for giving class. My question is, how as like a neophyte, we might not have like the best vision for knowing who's bona fide because, how do we not get steered by the people who are unbona fide? How do we know who is truly bona fide?
One answer Prabhupada gave was to John Lennon. If you look in that conversation in September 1969, John Lennon and Yoko Ono are asking Prabhupada the same question. Particularly in the book, interpreted whose Bhagavad Gita should we accept? It said one who's not even one word of Krishna, how can you accept his authority? But one who can't but utter Krishna's name and his entire everything is for Krishna's devotional service. Many of us, many of Prabhupada's disciples, they did quite a search. Especially back in those days where all kinds of, even somebody put in my hand the other day, Paramahamsa Yogananda, autobiography of a yogi. Prabhupada said at the time when Macmillan Bhagavad Gita was finally published, there were 400 English translations of the Bhagavad Gita, some 50 or 54 years ago. But did even one man become a devotee from all of those? No. So Prabhupada, as the not just bona fide, but the most dear and confidential and beloved devotee of Krishna, his books are just so potent, sparshamani, like a touchstone, to just transform people back into who they really are, pure devotees of Krishna. So that is an oft given answer by Srila Prabhupada to your question, who's bona fide?
Well, if I may add, I know Prabhupada's bona fide, but how can I find someone bona fide that's in the Bible?
Those who represent Prabhupada nicely. Okay. And we'll leave it at that. Sorry, thank you. Grandfather Bhishma Dev. I didn't cut you off, but I gave you a good answer. So in the 9th chapter of the 1st canto, it's called The Passing of Grandfather Bhishma Dev. It's a very beautiful chapter with many amazing purports and a lot of information from Bhishma Dev himself. So I found this very interesting. What date was Gita Jayanti this year? Gita Jayanti is the 14th of December? Okay. So when did Grandfather Bhishma get shot with the arrows? On which of the 18 days? That's a Mahabharata scholar question. Okay, so December 14th plus 18 days is what, January 3rd is the end of the Battle of Kurukshetra. So this verse 29 of the 9th chapter, while Bhishma Dev was this 10th day. The 10th? That's when he got shot, the 10th day. Really? So the 10th day would be Christmas Eve this year, December 24th, right? Okay, so now, Makara Sankranti this year was on the 15th of January, right? And today is February 7th, February 8th. So this verse 29, while Bhishma Dev was describing occupational duties, the sun's horse ran into the northern hemisphere. That's Makara Sankranti. So we say like December 21st is the lowest point. And astrologers, they describe that the sun god's chariot and all the horses, it takes from December 21st to Makar Sankranti to turn them around, because they've been going the northern direction, and now they're gonna, well, anyway, going back into the northern, so the days get longer, so they've been turning around. So Makara Sankranti, and that's a very auspicious day. And Bhishma Dev, he was given the benediction because of his Bhishma, terrible vow, brahmacharya. He will not leave his body unless he wishes to, or he can choose the time that he leaves his body. There was a Bhanu Swami, who was just Bhanu at the time, in the Calcutta temple in the early 1970s, when there was a lot of strife and management issues and devotees were getting sick and unhealthy. But only Bhanu Swami, Bhanu, was hale, hearty, healthy, and bright-faced. And Prabhupada noticed that and said, this is because he is Naishtik Brahmachari. He didn't get sick or wasn't all disturbed in his mind. He was fixed in his purpose, and Krishna protected him and insulated him from all other problems. So, on Makar Sankranti Day, this period is desired by mystics who die at their will. That man, thereupon that man who spoke on different subjects with thousands of meanings and who fought on thousands of battlefields and protected thousands of men, stopped speaking, and being completely freed from all bondage, withdrew his mind from everything else and fixed his wide open eyes upon the original personality of Godhead, Sri Krishna, who stood before him, four-handed, dressed in yellow garments that glittered and shined. So from Makara Sankranti to today, February 8th, is a good number of days. What is that? 16 plus 8, 24 days. So these verses onwards, he's describing meditation on Arjuna, as part of the Sarthi, and how he forced Krishna to give up his promise, that he wouldn't take up arms during the battle. I'm going to fight so hard that unless Krishna personally picks up a weapon, his friend Arjuna will die today. So he's speaking, and then he's begging, he's describing Krishna's relationship, particularly with the gopis, and how he begs to have their mercy at the time. So all of this is spoken. And in this verse in particular, Prabhupada gives, as he was doing throughout the first canto, and as he later said, I've given everything in the first canto in case I don't finish the work. At the momentous hour of leaving the body, Bhishma Dev set the glorious example concerning the important function of the human form of life. The subject, in italics, subject matter which attracts the dying man becomes the beginning of his next life. Therefore, if one is absorbed in thoughts of the Supreme Lord, he is sure to go back to Godhead without any doubt. This is confirmed in Bhagavad Gita 8:5 through 15, and Prabhupada gives 5:6, gives the English translation for all the verses, all in a row, all the way. And the Sri Bhishma Dev, concluding verse 15, after attaining me, the great souls who are yogis in devotion. This is good. We're not just yogis or yoga. We're yogis in devotion. Not yogis in Mayavad, not yogis in impersonalism, not yogis in type of sensual. Hey man, anybody ever come to the table? We got the Kama Sutra? You ever get that? I get that. Yo, you get that? Hey, like a Yankee fan. The only yogi I know is Yogi Berra, who was the famous catcher for the New York Yankees. Sri Bhishma Dev attained the perfection of quitting his body at will and was fortunate enough to have Lord Krishna, the object of his attention, personally present at the time of death. He therefore fixed his open eyes upon him. He wanted to see Sri Krishna for a long time out of his spontaneous love for him. Because he was a pure devotee, he had very little to do with the detailed performance of yogic principles. Simple bhakti yoga is enough to bring perfection. Prabhupada writes in the second chapter of the 10th canto, this famous book distribution verse, where the demigods are saying, those who hear and chant and allow or facilitate and cause others to hear and chant about you, oh, our dear Lord, they are very great personalities. I forget exactly. The word kriyashu, by manual labor or work in this regard, is very important. All our activities in this Krishna consciousness movement are centered around distributing Krishna literature. One can approach any man and induce him to take and read Krishna literature, and in this way, they will become a devotee. Describing Maharaj Ambarish's devotional service in the 4th chapter of the 9th canto, how in terms of deity worship, all the elaborate arrangements that he made. And Prabhupada, Maharaj Ambarish said that this is austerity. Similarly, the austerity of preparing literature, preaching to atheistic men, door to door. This is austerity. Such austerity is necessary because it purifies one and one can achieve the ultimate goal of life. So that, getting the book cart ready, navigating the subway system, knowing which elevator works, or when there ain't no elevator, you have to carry that thing up and down. This is yoga, bhakti yoga, because it's facilitating giving love of Godhead to those who, if we didn't endeavor to do it, would have no chance to get love of Godhead. Bhishma Dev was able to see the person of Lord Krishna, the most lovable object, and by the grace of the Lord, Sri Bhishma Dev had this opportunity at the last stage of his breathing. Bhishma Dev said, let me now invest my thinking, feeling, and willing, which were so long engaged in different subjects and occupational duties, in the all-powerful Lord Sri Krishna. And I like this statement. It's always very memorable. Because Bhishma Dev was a statesman, the head of the Kuru dynasty, a great general and leader of Kshatriyas, his mind was strewn. You know what the word strewn means? That's right. Good. Over so many subjects, and his thinking, feeling, and willing were engaged in different matters. Now, in order to achieve pure devotional service, he wanted to invest all his powers of thinking, feeling, and willing entirely in the Supreme Being, Lord Krishna. So even though we're knowing the MTA, everybody has to get the MTA map. Don't use Google. MTA app. Don't forget, no more Google Maps. Train yourself up, MTA, and this and that. But still, we must have our early morning sadhana. So our mind is strewn over different subject matters. Just as Bhishma Dev, he was a Kshatriya and knowing how to fight. He was the famous Chinese military martial arts guru, Sun Tzu, The Art of War. Never interrupt your enemy when he's making mistakes, for example. So all of these things you calculate, but the ultimate goal is to win the battle for the good, for the righteous, for Krishna. But still, in order to achieve pure devotional service, he wanted to invest all his powers of thinking. So one has good concentrated sadhana, then one can go out there and overcome all the atheistic Maya and all the illusions and everything, individually and collectively. But if we don't have good sadhana and our mind is not fixed up in Krishna consciousness, then we can't perform those preaching activities very nicely, what to speak of even at all. Desires cannot be wiped out, but they have only to be purified. So this is a very wonderful day to remember Grandfather Bhishma Dev and beg for his mercy. He's one of the Mahajans, one of the authorities on devotional service, along with Shukadeva Goswami, Prahlad Maharaj, Bali Maharaj, and many others. Hare Krishna. Swapashana Nadilo Bhai, Samrita Pal, Radha Krishna Gudagal, Premiere Kochi Danitai, Jaini Mini Tai, Shishi Radha Govinda Ki Jai, Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai, Nitai Gaur Premanandi Hari Hari Bo.